Hey everybody, it's Catherine Ewing from Sacred Heart Alchemy. So I just came in from yoga and let's see, the farmer's market and a couple of other things, and was just about to head out to do some other things, and all of a sudden I just was overwhelmed with this, I'll call it a message from Spirit to reach out to you. And I almost didn't do it because, hi Lynn, I almost didn't do it because I feel so raw and and emotional right now. And I'm not exactly sure why, except that I think the message that I want to bring through is so close to my heart. Hi, Chris. And I'm a little nervous, honestly. But here I am, because the whole message is about leading with my heart, leading with your heart, inviting women to lead with your hearts. Even when there are other parts of yourself that may be screaming, no, don't do it. You're going to embarrass yourself, or, people are going to think you're crazy or out of your mind, or they're not going to understand why there's so much emotion around this. And again, this is exactly why I decided to jump on and do this Facebook Live, because I could very easily have ignored that message from Spirit, hi Tanya, and walked away. And I want to share some of my history with you because it really provides a backdrop for where I'm going with this video. So I hope it's all right with y'all if I back up about 12 or 13 years ago and really kind of set the stage for this. What I hope is a really authentic and powerful message about slowing down, listening to your heart, turning down the volume on that voice of the ego that wants to remind us how many things we have to be afraid of, or all the reasons why we shouldn't follow our dream or step into our next highest expression of ourselves. And for me, it really goes back right around the time when I turned 50, and my life as I knew it turned completely upside down. I had already been in seminary. I'd been on a pretty significant spiritual journey at that point already, getting trained in many different energy healing modalities, and then being guided to join the Seminary of Spiritual Peacemaking. Hi, Mary Kay. And went through a very powerful 2 years as a seminarian in the beloved community to become ordained as a minister of spiritual peacemaking. And it would take all day to talk about that, long journey. But the power of what was happening in my life then is pretty undescribable. But just to shorten it up, so I joined the Seminary of Spiritual Peacemaking in 2004, and that was a 2-year program. And in the years immediately following that, my life turned completely inside out and upside down. I left the therapy practice I was working in. That looks like Sheila. Hey, Sheila. I left the therapy practice that I was working in. I left my 30-year marriage. And in that process, I left my, 2,500 square foot home in the suburbs. And the most difficult part of all was that my children stayed with their father because that was the house they had grown up in. And so my children stayed with their dad. My dogs stayed with their dad, although I was really their mom. And I opened a healing center without really knowing what I was doing. I really just trusted Spirit. I was guided to do that when I was at my first seminary retreat. So I left my employment as it was back then. I had 2 things that I was doing. I had a part-time therapy practice, and I was also coordinating a statewide task force on justice for abused children. And I stepped away from both of those to open a healing center called Spirit Matters. And in the years that followed, as I said, I left my marriage. My children stayed with their dad. My animals stayed with their dad. And I actually moved into a 200 square foot studio apartment in the basement of someone's home. And that's where I lived for the next 18 months while I sort of tried to figure out what the heck I was doing in my life. So I changed jobs. I became an entrepreneur. I opened a healing center. I moved out of my home into, this little tiny, literally one room. It was a lovely room, but it was one room. And I left really my financial security because it was my decision to leave after 30 years, and the children were staying with their dad. And so I didn't take alimony, and really stepped out on my own for the first time. Hi, Lori. In my life, I had moved from my parents' house into an apartment, and very soon after that, had already met the man I was going to marry at 22, and so we were already together. So I really had not been on my own at all up until that time when I was 52. And so I moved out onto my own, and I one day happened to come across a website. It was called the 8 Rooms of Creation. I remember that so clearly, even though it was so long ago. And in the first room, you were invited to write, what it is that you wanted to manifest, right? And that was easy for me. I had this new healing center. I wanted to manifest this beautiful, vibrant, energetic community, right, through this healing center. And I wanted to create a life for myself as a speaker and a coach, and, have this really thriving practice. And that part was easy. Then I got to room number 2, which was now write about your fears. And I could probably still find, if I went to look for it quickly, the piece of paper that I ended up transcribing this onto, because this was done on the computer. But what poured out of me was this fear, just like at a gut-wrenching level. I think I was probably sobbing as I wrote this fear that people would see me as a charlatan and a fraud, and I would be questioned as to my integrity and who did I think I was, and how are you putting yourself up on this pedestal as a spiritual teacher or mentor or coach or whatever I might have been referring to myself as in those days. And there was a piece of being publicly humiliated, like in the stocks, right? So I don't know how, I realize now that there was so much past life energy and information coming through, because that had in fact been my experience in other lives, that I had been turned in as a heretic. I had lost everything. I had been tortured. I had been, thrown in some underground awful cell for years. And hey, Diane, how are you? And so that was my story. And it blew me away that it poured out of me. And so I'm sort of telling you that piece, this terrible fear about being seen as a fraud, being seen as a charlatan, being publicly humiliated, being called out in front of people and sort of forced to prove myself or defend myself. And that was terrifying for me. Hi, Amla. And thank you for being here, everyone. And so I lived with that, and I had to do a lot of work, obviously, to get through that fear if I was ever going to be able to promote my healing center, have people come and promote my own, hi Eileen, my own practice as both as a therapist, but mostly more as a coach, because the therapy clients were easier to come by, right? I took their insurance, or people would refer them to me, so I didn't really have to promote the therapy practice so much. But the coaching practice and the speaking practice, practice isn't the right word, but you know what I mean. Promoting myself as a speaker really took a whole different energy, and really, I really had to look at that fear about being out of integrity or being called a fraud or a charlatan in order to promote myself. So I'm saying all of this because one of the things I am in the midst of right now is promoting a retreat that I'm doing for women in the middle of September. And as I said, I just came in from a yoga class and being at the farmer's market and running a few errands and running into women. And, I take the opportunity to speak to women about this retreat and what I'm doing. And what I've heard over and over for the last 2 months, really, that I've been actively promoting this retreat is that, oh my God, it looks awesome. I so need something like that. I would love to be able to come, but, right? And some of the buts are, I already have a commitment for that weekend or whatever it might happen to be. But mostly the but is about, I can't afford it. I'm really struggling right now. This is not a good time for me. Let me know when you're doing it the next time, right? So a lot of the reason that I'm hearing for people not being able to attend or making the decision, I don't want to say not being able to, but making the decision, telling themselves that they can't attend is because of the cost. And so I want to back up to that experience in my life between 12 and 13, 12 years ago, where literally I stepped away from my life as I knew it, completely turned it inside down, inside out, upside down, and really could have used that money card that I don't have the money to deny myself the opportunity to step more deeply into my own personal healing and transformation and deeper onto my spiritual path and metaphysics, because it would have been easy for me at the time. I was really scared about how I was going to manage. I had just opened a new healing center. I had stepped out of my marriage and all the financial security that I knew. I was probably going through some depression, certainly a lot of anxiety. I was without my children, I was without my pets, and really sort of out there on my own for the first time in my life at 52 years old. And it was a very fine line, I like to say, between, kind of a spiritual awakening and a complete psychotic break. Like there were days when I wasn't quite sure where that line was. It was not an easy time in my life. And then, throw in on top of that, probably going through menopause at the same time. And I was all over the place, right? My emotions, my moods were really all over the place. And I could very easily have said, no, I can't go on that retreat. I can't do that healing thing. I can't go see a Reiki person. I can't. But I chose that I was going to allow myself to listen to the call from spirit. I wasn't just going nilly-willy to everything, although I wanted to, because I was so engrossed then in spiritual growth and learning new things. And I'd already been trained in 7 or 8 different energy healing modalities, in addition to going through seminary. And I really was very deep in this aspect of my own personal growth and development. And I just started to get very tuned in to where I was being guided, what my next step was, because I knew I couldn't just spend. And I also knew that there were some things that were going to be very important for me to do to continue my own personal journey. And what's amazing to me is, even though I never really knew how it was going to happen or how I was going to manage, I was able to continue to do the things that felt really important for me to do and be able to afford them, to have a coach, to go on retreats, to maybe go for a certification in some particular, aspect of coaching or personal development. And I was able to go wherever I was called with lots of different resources. Perhaps there was someone who came into my life, who had the resources and wanted to be able to support me. Or all of a sudden I would be asked to speak somewhere or to teach somewhere, and, some more money would come in a different way. And I'm telling you all of this because ultimately what I want to share is the power of stepping out of your day-to-day life and stepping into some kind of personal growth experience, a retreat, a training, a certification. Hey, Deb, and how powerful that is. In my experience over the last, I want to say 25 years now, because I sort of gauge it from when my youngest child was born, my daughter Julia, that was really when my spiritual growth kicked in a very accelerated way. And so it's been, 25 years, and I can honestly say there's been daily growth, seriously, daily growth. And then there have been periods of very deep personal growth. And then there have been the times when I've really stepped out and gone on a retreat, to a training, stepped out of life. And I can tell you from my own personal experience that making that commitment to myself, taking the time to do that for myself, facing the fear of where's the money going to come from? How am I going to be able to do this? And say, you know what? This is where my heart is calling me. I'm going to trust that somehow this is all going to be taken care of. Those retreats, those times of stepping out of my day-to-day life, of trying to survive, figure out how to make this all happen, the healing center, and being away from my kids, and moving through, being really single and on my own for the first time in my life ever. Those retreats, those times of stepping out, were really where my faith muscle was completely deepened, where my personal transformation was the greatest, and where I was able to come back into my life literally transformed. It's magical to be able to be held in a sacred space in order to do the deeper work that I feel we're really called to do and almost required to do if we want to continue to move more fully, intentionally, and authentically on our spiritual path. It was in one of those retreats, oh my gosh, 10 years ago now, where I so clearly, during a guided meditation, and this was somewhat new for me 10 years ago, felt the presence of Mary Magdalene and Yeshua, each on one side of me, clearly giving me the message that I was here to create heaven on earth. And I was, all righty, how do you do that? And tears streaming down my face. And they said, your peace will be the healing of the wound of the feminine, to balance the masculine and feminine energy on this planet. Now, 10 years ago, I really didn't know what that meant, but I had gotten that message in other readings, at other retreats, through other spiritual teachers, about creating heaven on earth and about balancing and healing the masculine and feminine energy. And I had been told that this is the work that I was doing internally within myself as I went through all of these changes in my own life and in my own story, so that I could bring that forward, right, for other women and to some degree men, but mostly my work has been with and for women. And so I can't begin to describe and explain the power of the transformation that happens in these kinds of experiences. And that's what I would like to invite you into for this retreat that I'm doing for women on the weekend of September 14th through the 16th, because I know what being in that sacred container in the environment of Stillwater's Pond, which is a beautiful sacred space, in a small and intimate group of women can do for you in your own healing, in your own growth, in your own awareness of who you are as a spiritual being, and where you are being called at this point, both on your personal journey and in, sort of our cosmic journey, our journey as humans on this planet at this time. I know I'm preaching to the choir here because I know who my audience is when I'm telling you that we are in a remarkable period of time right now. You can feel it. I know most of you are light workers. Most of you are empaths. Even if you don't know yourself to do that, you feel this energy and you are moved by it. And at some level of your being, of your being, you know that we are in a challenging and magical period of time. It is really a time of alchemy where everything that has been dark and held in the shadows and below the surface is being pushed up into the light to be revealed and ultimately to be healed. I know that you've all felt, because I posted, that funny picture. I'm going to thank Carrie for sending that to me, of a woman emerging from Mercury retrograde. Like, she looks like she's just been through hell and back. And some of us feel that way. This summer has been intense. And I just know how much stepping out of this energy into a different energy with a small group of women can really now help bring everything you've been experiencing to a magical place of alchemy, right? That's the name of my business, Sacred Heart Alchemy, where we drop into our hearts, where we look at the story that we've lived or the story that we've been telling about our lives, that we may still be telling ourselves about our lives, and reorganize those pieces that may be broken or shattered or pushed into the shadows, and spend time beautifully bringing those pieces back into awareness and rearranging them and reorganizing them to see how the parts that felt that they've been shattered and broken and victimized and unseen and unheard can really be loved now into a place of having them become, hi Pamela, the very things that are the building blocks, that are the jumping off. I'm picturing a diving board in my mind, the springboard for us now to step into our next highest level of evolution and revolution and expression of ourselves as divine spiritual beings. It's really difficult. I love the landing page, the sales page for my retreat. I think it's beautiful. I think the languaging is beautiful, but the truth is it's a two-dimensional thing, right? It's something that you read and you scroll through and you may feel something from it. But if you haven't been on a retreat where you have experienced this deep level of transformation and alchemy, it's very difficult to explain to someone who hasn't had that experience what it's like and what it's going to be like when you come to this retreat. So what I'd like to do is just give you a short experience of one of the practices we'll do at the retreat. There's going to be a lot of guided meditation. There's going to be a lot of imagery. There's going to be a lot of opportunity to do the inner work and then bring that to the surface and share with the other people there, whether verbally or through writing. There'll be time in nature to really walk and sit by the water or wherever you're drawn and integrate the work that we're doing. Hey, Sandy, to integrate that the work that we do individually and together. So I'd like to just spend literally 3 minutes, if you'll be, allow me to take this time and just share with you one of the beautiful exercises that we'll probably do more than once, and that hopefully you will then take into your life, because it's one of the exercises that I love. I use it with my clients all the time. I use it in my own life because it's so simple but so powerful. And so if you're listening live, or if you're listening to the recording of this later on, I'm just going to invite you to bring one or both hands over your heart. This is called the heart-brain coherence. I just want to quickly look at the clock so I'm aware of the time. And if your legs are crossed, go ahead and uncross your legs so that your feet are flat on the floor. And allow your eyes to gently close, or even just lower if closing your eyes is not completely comfortable for you. And I'm just going to invite Lee. I'm already rocking. I always seem to get into a rocking motion with this little exercise. So I'll just invite you now, as you close your eyes, which will help to eliminate about 80% of the stimulation outside of yourself, the visual stimulation. And with your hand over your heart, it'll allow you more easily to drop from your busy mind into your heart, as we come into a place of coherence between our heart and our brain. Focusing your energy just gently on your breath now. And without strain, without forcing anything, just allow your inhalation to stretch out to a count of 5. And then finding that moment of stillness, that still point in the breath, as it then turns the corner, if you will, into the exhalation. And allowing your exhalation to be just the same length. 5 seconds, count of 5. And again, finding that moment of stillness as the breath turns again to the inhalation. And just allowing yourself to continue with that easy, effortless breath. Perhaps imagining the breath as a wave moving in and out of your heart. And when the breath becomes settled and easy, we'll just invite a few words in as a mantra to bring some higher vibration energy into this lovely little breath process. We'll start with appreciation, gratitude, care, and compassion. Appreciation, gratitude, care, and compassion. Taking a few more moments to allow the words and the vibration of those words to settle into every cell of your body. And allowing now your hands to drop away from your heart, perhaps back into your lap. Allowing your eyes to float open on the wave of the breath. Perhaps bringing some movement into your fingers and your toes to bring yourself back into your physical body. And then just taking a moment to observe, just from that place of neutrality, noticing how that feels in your body, noticing whether your mind has quieted even a little bit. So again, that's called the heart-brain coherence. I have a version on my YouTube channel with a longer explanation about the benefits of that beside the obvious sort of relaxation that you notice. I hope you all noticed as we did it. It also begins a cascade of feel-good chemicals through your body, sort of the opposite of what we have when we're in, an anxious or stressed out or fight or flight response. This little practice, which is really just 3 minutes. I may have gone a little bit over 3 minutes because I didn't have I usually set the timer on my phone, on my clock, so that it'll jingle at the end of 3 minutes and I'll know it's time to bring it to a completion. But there's a beautiful cascade of chemicals that begins to move through your body in these 3 minutes that continues to support you for 6 hours after this little 3-minute exercise. So you were really reversing the flow of chemicals, of stress chemicals, and bringing in these chemicals that actually bring relaxation and calmness and literally begin to repair your DNA, especially the end caps, the telomeres on your strands of DNA. They begin to fray, and that leads to illness and sort of the aging process. So bringing these positive chemicals through will really support healing and anti-aging. So that's one example, a very short example of what we'll do together during the retreat from Friday evening until Sunday afternoon. There'll be all kinds of other wonderful things mixed in. So I think that I will probably bring this to an end here. This was sort of spontaneous. I really wasn't exactly sure all of what I would bring in. I just knew I was feeling guided by Spirit to come on and even though, as I started at the beginning, talking about how challenging it is for me to really put myself out there and promote myself, because that whole fear of being seen as a fraud or a charlatan or, somebody who's putting themselves up as a spiritual teacher and, how do I do that? I've gotten much more comfortable with it in the 11 or 12 or 13 years since I wrote that original statement. But it's still not easy for me. I can still feel that little, hiccup, especially when it comes to inviting people into something I'm offering, which is really what I'm doing here. I am inviting you to do what I talked about earlier on in this video, to really check in. Hi, Laura, to check in with your heart, with your higher self, with your inner guidance, whatever languaging you use around that, and see if there is a call or a pull to step out of your life for a couple of days into a sacred container to do some healing work, to do some connection with all of you, right? Not just the parts that we use every day when we're out in the world and taking care of our loved ones and taking care of our family or our clients or whatever it is that we do day in and day out, but to really bring that energy to yourself, to connect more with your own intuition, with your own guidance, with your own spirit. Because, as they say, we are spiritual beings having a human journey, not the other way around. You are spirit. So there's actually no way that you can be off your spiritual path. You're always on your spiritual path because you are spirit walking that path. Whether your ego mind or the human part of you wants to tell you that you're not on your path or you need to get on your path, or just know it's all the path. And so if you feel called to this retreat, I would love to speak with you. I would love you to consider, even if that voice of fear or doubt or your ego saying you can't do this, it's too much money, you don't have the time, who do you think you are, to really stop for a moment and maybe do what we just did. Take a few breaths, put your hands over your heart and just check in, because I am gonna venture a guess here that if your child needed something that cost what this retreat cost, you would find a way to get it for them. If your best friend needed something from you, you would take the time away from your life to go and be with your friend and support her or him or a loved one. I know that you would offer those gifts. You would find a way to make it happen if it was for someone else that you loved and you cared about. And I'm not trying to sound hokey here. I'm not trying to sound salesy here. But I want you to hear that I'm inviting you to offer yourself what you might offer to someone else. To find a way to give yourself something that your heart may be calling you to be a little less quick to listen to the voice in your head, your ego, that's telling you all of the reasons that you can't do this. So it's an invitation to move out of the ego mind. The ego and the soul have very different paths for you, right? The ego and the soul have very different perspectives on things. And so I'll invite you to turn down the dial, turn down the volume on the ego, turn up the volume on your soul, on your higher self, on your inner guidance, and just see where you're drawn. If you liked that little exercise that we did just now, know that the weekend will be full of those kinds of simple exercises that can be very profound over the long run, because they literally can change your DNA, and then longer exercises where you'll be invited to do even deeper work. So I think that's it. I hope that I was able to give you a feel, a sense of what it would be like to step away for a couple of days, to do a deeper dive into your own heart, and to do some alchemy in your own life, to change up what's been in the past, to bring some love and some intention and some clarity and some guidance and self-care to that, and so that you can change it now into your next highest expression of yourself here. Okay, my loves, I think it's time for me to go. And thanks so much for stopping in, for taking the time to listen. I wish you a beautiful day. Hope that you will consider what I've talked about here. And if you want to reach out to me, please feel free. Obviously, you know how to find me on Facebook, because here we are together. So it's as easy as that. Okay, take care. All love. Bye now.